We're going to talk about Mohamed Al Fayed today. Now, this is a man who got everything you could possibly want in life, right? We're talking immense wealth, famous landmarks, just undeniable power. But as we're about to see, owning the world doesn't always buy you peace.
What if I told you that one of the world's most powerful Muslim billionaires lived a life that was just filled with pain, with controversy, secrets, and so many unanswered questions? This is the story of a man who literally went from the streets of Alexandria to taking on the British monarchy, and he left behind a legacy that we're still trying to figure out today.
All right, so to really get who Mohamed Al Fayed was, you have to go back, way back, to where it all started, the bustling port city of Alexandria, Egypt.
I mean, we are talking really humble beginnings here. He was born in 1929, and his dad was a school teacher. A really respectable job, for sure, but it wasn't going to make the family rich. So, as a kid, he was out there on the streets selling Coca-Cola, selling sewing machines. He wasn't just learning how to make a sale. He was learning how to survive, how to hustle, how to read people. And this right here is the key to understanding his early years. The thing that was driving him wasn't a desire for fancy cars or mansions, not yet anyway. It was this deep, nagging restlessness. You know that feeling? The feeling that you're meant for something bigger? And that ambition? Well, it was about to get forged in fire.
You know, every great empire has a foundation. And for Mohamed Al Fayed, that foundation was built on pain.
From what we can piece together, the death of his father was this huge turning point for him. The world probably felt a lot less safe all of a sudden. But that pain, it didn't really show up on the outside as weakness. No, it turned inward. It became silence.
And that inner silence wasn't empty. Not at all. It was like he just cleared out all the distractions, all the noise, and it let him channel all of that grief into this incredibly sharp, almost obsessive focus on his goals.
And there it is. That's the transformation. That raw, relentless focus. It hardened. It became the ambition that would really define the rest of his life. He learned a lesson early on. To get where he wanted to go, he had to be tougher, smarter, and more driven than absolutely everyone else. But, you know, ambition doesn't just equal instant success. His early career was actually a string of pretty public failures. There was this oil deal in Haiti that turned out to be molasses. Can you imagine? And a big-time business partnership that just fell apart. To a lot of people, he was probably a washout. But for Al Fayed, this wasn't failure. This was school.
So after learning some very hard, very public lessons, Al Fayed completely switched up his strategy. He stopped trying to make big, flashy moves and started to build his empire quietly, from the shadows.
And his new game plan was all about patience. He moved to Dubai, started making these incredibly important connections. He set up a company, IMS, that was basically the middleman between British industry and all this money in the Middle East. There were no flashy headlines, just quiet deals, powerful handshakes, and smart investments that slowly, steadily built his fortune.
And then, bam, the moment he steps back into the light. In 1985, he puts down £650 million for Harrods, the most famous department store in London. With that one move, the outsider from Alexandria became a landmark himself. You couldn't ignore him anymore.
And the numbers, they're just staggering. At his peak, his net worth was estimated to be around $2 billion. Let that sink in. The restless kid who sold soda on the streets was now one of the richest men on the planet.
But Al Fayed was about to learn a very hard lesson. Turns out money can buy you a palace, but it can't always buy you a seat at the table. This next chapter of his life is all about this massive clash between his incredible power and the one thing he could never seem to get: acceptance. Just think about that for a second. This is the central paradox of his entire life. On one hand, he owns these global symbols of luxury, Harrods, the Ritz in Paris. On the other, he was repeatedly and very publicly denied British citizenship. And that rejection, it fueled this bitter, lifelong war against the British establishment.
And then, that public fight just gets completely swallowed by an unthinkable personal tragedy. In 1997, his son Dodi was killed in that horrific car crash with Princess Diana. For Al Fayed, his grief turned into this obsessive, all-consuming quest for answers. His fight against the establishment wasn't just about acceptance anymore. It became a personal, defiant war.
Which brings us to the final, and let's be honest, the most difficult chapter of his story. Because even after his death, the questions about his power and how he used it have only gotten louder, especially now that they're clouded by some very serious allegations.
So in 2024, media reports brought forward allegations from over 200 women. These claims are about sexual misconduct during the years he owned Harrods. Now, it's really, really important to be clear here. These are allegations. The situation is still being discussed legally, but they force us to look at his whole legacy in a new light. They make you ask, did that same relentless drive that built his empire also create a culture where he felt he was above the rules?
So at the end of the day, who was Mohamed Al Fayed? How do we even begin to define him? Was he a visionary who built an empire out of nothing? Was he a victim of an establishment that was never going to accept him no matter what he did? Or was he, ultimately, just a man who was consumed by the very power he spent his entire life chasing?
Maybe the answer is that he was all of those things at once. His life is this powerful and, frankly, cautionary tale. It shows us that success doesn't just make pain disappear, and having all the power in the world, well, that's no guarantee you'll ever find peace.